Colorado families, this week on Community Chat, Hagen Nares PLC, truck wreck and brain injury attorneys, is speaking with Kelli Riley, owner of Riley Law LLC. Kelli is an employment and a civil rights lawyer and specializes in discrimination, unequal pay scales, and sexual harassment cases. She does other work too, and I'm going to let her explain what that is. She is a phenomenal lawyer to go to in Northern Colorado. Kelli is here to tell us about her journey in starting Riley Law, what it's like to be a client of hers, and a trading tidbit for the community. Welcome, Kelli. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to tell you just a little bit about some of the other things I do. I do a lot of severance reviews or contract reviews. Just last week, I looked at a non-compete agreement for someone who was going to work for a competitor. He wanted to know if it was enforceable. And so those are some of the other things that I get the opportunity to work on. A little bit about my journey. I always call myself the accidental entrepreneur. And it really took me a long time to get to a place where I embraced being a woman business owner as part of my identity. So the reason I say I was an accidental entrepreneur is that in 2014, I was 9 months pregnant with my one and only child, and the firm I was working for terminated me. And it was during the last recession, and I applied for jobs, but there weren't jobs in Northern Colorado. And so I either was going to have to commute 2 hours each way during rush hour down to Denver from Greeley, where I lived, or I was going to have to take what few jobs there were not in my practice area, and I was going to have to learn something totally different. And the only way I was going to be able to do the kind of work I loved and knew how to do was to start my own law firm. And about 6 different people told me, if you start your own law firm, I'll send you cases. And I was like, I've only been in practice a couple of years. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel like I can do that. And someone that I met with, who became my mentor, told me, if you start your own law firm, I'll send you cases and I'll help you. I'll mentor you. You can call me and ask me questions. I'll send you samples. And I went in it with 1 foot out the door the whole first year. The whole first year, I had every expectation it wasn't going to work out. And I worked, that whole first year, I worked about 9 to 12 hours a week because that's as much as I could afford to pay a nanny, to watch my child. And I was depleting our savings. All my clients were contingent cases. And so I was just getting like little settlements here and there after several months of working. And at the end of that first year, I had settled. It was just before the end of the first year. I had settled my last case. I had no clients. And I was like, okay, is this my sign that like I need to do something else? And then in March, so I started my firm in April of the prior year. And then in March, I got 30 new clients that month. And then I was like, okay, that's my sign that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I've had lots of bumps along the way. I actually did leave my firm and go work for another firm for a few months, because the roller coaster is really, really hard being a small business owner. And I just was kind of like heartsick about how hard it is to have employees that depend on me and have to worry about being able to pay all the bills for the firm all the time. And so I thought, there's got to be something better. And I went and worked for this other firm, and I cried most of my first day. And that should have been my sign, but I made it 4 months before I was like, no, I'm leaving. I can't do this. And went back to having my own firm, and I have been doing that ever since. So other than that 4-month hiatus, I've had Riley Law for going on 9 years in April. And that is my journey to having my firm.
Well, I think that's fantastic you sharing and being vulnerable to talk about it because the fact is you do employment type of cases. And so the natural conversation that you're having with some of your clients is about this stuff, is having to leave because of pregnancy, maybe having maternity issues with regards to work, any kind of leave issues. Also, the bumps of being a business owner and being an employee of a small business, all things you talk about. So I think that's a great path to being a journey. Now, all of your experience culminates in the way that you have your law firm set up and the way you treat your clients and everything being in your image. So I'd love to talk to you about what is it like to be your client? What sets you apart from any other employment law firms in Colorado? And what is unique about you?
So one of the things that makes me unique is that I am bilingual. There are very few Spanish-speaking attorneys in Colorado. Another thing that makes our firm unique is that we have a large part of our caseload that is wage law cases, which consists of things like unpaid overtime, unpaid commissions, unpaid final paychecks. I actually have a case. This is one of my favorite, like, bizarre story cases, which is that I have an employee client that made $400,000 a year, but most of his pay was commissions. And the weeks he didn't make commissions, he wasn't making minimum wage. And so that's some of the things that set me apart, is that I do have a large variety of practice areas. I do pretty much everything in employment law, where some firms focus on different areas. When you're a client of mine, you're going to experience empathy, something I say to a lot of my clients, especially when I'm meeting with them for the first time, even if it's over Zoom, and they might get emotional. People always apologize to me about getting emotional when they're meeting with me, and I say, you are not the first person to cry on either side of this desk. And even yesterday, I was on the phone with a client, and she was going through something I had gone through, and I got emotional and was crying with her, because for most of my clients, that losing their job is not the only bad thing that happens at the same time. They have lives and lots of other complicating things that happen. Sometimes losing their job is a domino that sets off a chain reaction of bad things that happen after losing their job. And so we, as a team at my firm, are really here to support them and help them move forward. I never, ever use the term move on, because I know, as someone who has been discriminated against, that it's not something you move on from, especially not, when you come to see me, maybe days or at most, 3 to 4 months after it's happened. You're not in a place where you're ready to move on. You're in a place where you want to get even. And I'm here to support that person, to provide an empathy, to tell them that I have the experience that they need to shepherd them through this process and hopefully get them a result that will help bring them peace so they can move forward.
I think that's fantastic. And I know that you do so many different aspects of employment law, but I know it's going to be hard for you to pick just one thing. But if you could share anything with the community, just a training tidbit of something that they didn't know before, that it may be very useful for them to know as an employer, or information that they can share with others, or as an employee or employer, what would you want us all to know?
So the most common claim I see is unpaid overtime. And it is more common in the last year because the threshold for salaried employees changed, for employees that are subject to the executive exemption, which you may have heard called the managerial exemption or the supervisor exemption. So they have to be paid a certain amount of money, and they have to supervise employees a certain percentage of the time. It has to be at least 50% of the time, and they have to supervise at least 2 employees. The exemption changed for highly compensated employees, which a lot of people don't even know an exemption for overtime. But they have to make this year it's $124,000 a year. And then there is another exemption for commissioned employees, where they have to make a certain amount. It's a percentage of that highly compensated level. So a lot of people will call us, and we ask every single person who calls us, are you working overtime? And sometimes they'll say, no, I'm salaried. And we say, but are you working overtime? And if so, how many hours of overtime do you work? And then if you're salaried, what is your salary rate? And the reason we ask that is that a lot of people are salaried, but they're not actually exempt from overtime. And it's really important to look at the new laws that have come out from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment to make sure that if you are an employer, that the employees that you are paying a set salary and not paying overtime are truly exempt from overtime. And if you're an employee who's being paid salary and working overtime that's not being paid, that's correct as well.
Well, thank you, Kelli. Out of all the tips, I was hoping you would touch on that one because that is a huge one, that you may be a salaried employee, but you're in fact working overtime. And so that was a big thing that we made sure we were compliant on at our firm with all staffers. And so if you learned something from this training tidbit, if you're an employer or even employee, you think that this is something that you didn't know about and want more information, Kelli is a wealth of information and would be able to provide anything to you guys. And so I want to connect you with the community. What's the best way to reach you or to learn more about these employment regulations from you?
So we are on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, and we are also on TikTok for as long as it lasts. It's at Riley Law LLC. We have a YouTube channel for Riley Law LLC, and then our website is RileyLawLLC.com.
Fantastic. And I will include all of that information and hyperlinks in the show notes. Thank you so much, Kelli, for being here. We truly appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.